What does it mean to have a fragrant offering to God? That's what we're going to talk about today in Ephesians 5. Well, it's Ephesians 5. Hi, this is Jill from the Northwoods talking about the Bible one small chapter at a time. We're going to see how Paul invites us into this life of holiness and love, light, mutual submission, and fragrance. We're going to figure that one out. When we talk about all of this practical advice that Paul is giving now, like I said, we started out very theological and now we are getting into practical, profound advice. He is giving advice to real people at a real time facing a culture that is against them. Much like, there are varying degrees of cultures against you, but we have one, even in the United States, of a culture that is against us. What do we do? How do we live our lives? And sometimes, when we think about it, we either give up, I just can't, I don't want to be that person, or we go in a direction that is off-putting. And so finding a place where we can follow what God told us to do, at the same time being a loving human being, how do we, get in there? So Paul begins to tell us to imitate God as beloved children. It says, you see that. You see kids, they dress up like dad or they dress up like mom, or, they try to imitate the things that they see around, their own parents. And that's what he's saying is look at your parents, and as beloved children, try to be more like your parents, right? In being God, in this case, it's the foundation. Where God's adopted, like I said, adoption was a big deal. That meant you got the whole kit and caboodle. You got everything. Maybe you got a kingdom, maybe you got possessions, but you're dearly loved. We're sealed, right? Stamped as being owned by God. And so we walk in love, just like Christ loved us, gave himself for us, a fragrance offering and sacrifice. And that is a difficult phrase. We don't really understand what it is because we don't do anything like this right now. The phrase fragrant offering, it goes back to the days of the Old Testament's sacrificial system. And in those days, a burnt offering was said to be a pleasant aroma. And you could see how, people would think that, because you would get this wafting of smell and it goes up, right? Smoke goes up. And so it is a scent that is pleasing towards God. And the imagery is there. It is a very good imagery. And Paul's saying that we should live our lives like Christ sacrificed for us. When we live our lives, it should be a sweet smelling offering. God is going, oh, look at Jill. Good job, Jill. Or, Jill, that was a real stinker. How do we live our lives? How do we love each other? How do we lay our lives down for each other? And that's the point. So Paul gets very practical now and says, sexual immorality, impurity, greed, filthy talk should have no place among his people. It's not minor issues. You may say, we've gotten into debates before where there are people who talk in a certain way that's not very Christian. Then let's just talk. It doesn't really matter. And instead, it's not a minor issue. It distorts not just our souls, it damages the community around us. It opens up doors to sort of a deeper darkness in people's lives. We are not victimless, essentially like that. Immorality, even in humor or even just in jest or, who cares, I'm at home, whatever, causes harm because it corrupts the heart, but it also corrupts how other people feel around us. And I'm just going to give kind of a weird example. There was a Stephen King book and a movie that was called Needful Things. And the idea behind it was sort of genius. Essentially, the devil moves into a small town in Maine, of course, because it's always Maine. And you'd think, oh, the devil's going to do some spectacularly horrible things. And instead what he does is he says, you know what? I'm going to give you the thing you've always wanted in your life. All you have to do is go throw mud on your neighbor's sheets. Well, throwing mud on my neighbor's sheet, who cares? That's pretty easy, right? Or someone else. I'm going to give you the baseball card you've always wanted to have. All you have to do is just put this envelope in your teacher's desk. They were all small things, but what it did is each act corrupted the community so dangerously that by the end of the time, they were at full-blown war with each other. That's kind of how it works, right? When we do the even minor things, we corrupt the community. And so instead of, crude jokes or bitterness, our mouths should be filled with thanksgiving. Instead of having greed and idolatry, because those two go hand in hand, right? If you're greedy and you worship other things, may not be what we consider to be other gods, but essentially are. And it's going to be money, it's going to be possession, it's going to be power. Whenever we're greedy about something, envy, idolatry, it all goes together. Not, like I said, just don't even think about the statues. Think about materialism, envy, and self-centeredness. He is talking to pagan statue central, place, right? This was the place for pagan statues. But he's saying there's more out there. This idolatry of all these things that are going on is really, materialism, envy, self-centeredness, really coming down to just not loving each other. And so he warns that those who persist in those things without repentance have no inheritance with God's kingdom. Don't be deceived by empty words. There is a seriousness here. We're called to come out of the darkness and into the light. And so we repent, we confess our sins, we want, not just to dismiss them. Like I said, I had a friend in college. She would go to confession every Sunday, and knowing that the next week she was going to do exactly what she did the previous week, which was a lot, because it was a get out of free jail card. She could just throw it out there. She didn't even care, right? Instead, it's saying, no, don't do that. Come out of the darkness. Come back into the light. And Paul continues on with this idea of light and dark themes. They're always my favorite examples in the Bible. You were once in darkness, and now you're in the light of the Lord. Walk like you are children in light. And what does that look like? It is found in good, righteousness, being true. It produces fruit. It exposes sin, not to shame other people, but to bring the truth out in the open. Again, you can't heal something until it's out in the open, right? If you have deep, burning heart things in there, they never get fixed because you never let them out into the open. Darkness festers everything that's going on inside of us, and it causes more secrecy, and secrecy causes more hurt and sin and all the bad things. Light, openness brings healing to that situation. I suggest that if you have issues to cover, talk to a spiritual counselor, a Christian counselor to work on those types of issues. He quotes then, "Awake, O sleeper, arise from the dead. Christ will shine on you." There's that light again, right? Wake up, come alive, live in the light. I love that idea that whenever you're there, we can go back into the light. And this idea of awake sleepers, I was trying to think about it in the sense that originally when people were talking about people who were dead, the idea is that we were just asleep. And I think when we're dead in sin, we're just asleep. It's time for us to wake up, live wisely, make the best use of the time we have because the days are evil. We have so much more free time than people had in ancient societies. How are we using it? Paul says, don't be foolish with it. Understand the Lord's will. Someone asked, it was a historian, that if, people from ancient times came to the modern world, what thing would astonish them the most? Would it be the airplanes, the computers, cars? What would that be? And he said, the most astonishing thing in our society is how much free time we have. People worked from dawn until dusk, and at dusk they worked on the inside too. It was work all day long. And now we're kind of like, I have to work 8 hours. This sucks. We're just stymied by just normal day life and don't understand this is amazing. And we, with more time, should understand this more than anyone else, that we have to make the best use of our time. That's the important thing. My friend and I, Em and I were talking this morning about how many people, get caught up their whole lives with things that either don't matter or try to affect things in ways that don't help. Our time is just wasted on things that we can't do a thing about instead of doing the things we can do something about, right? Anyway, he goes on and contrasts then on drunkenness with being filled with the Spirit. City like Ephesus, with all these pagan festivals, drunken worship, that was a big part of it. It'll hit home to them. And it hits home to us too. Instead of this wild, foolish living, we are meant to be filled with the Spirit, marked with a joy. Remember, joy is something deeper inside of us as compared to happiness. I'm happy today. But joy is something deep down inside of us. And that's what we're going to do. And he suggests psalms, hymns, spiritual songs. I'm not much of a song person, but a heart of thanksgiving. We fill ourselves back up again. And there's a lot of ways we can fill ourselves up. And he's suggesting that we go that direction. So the next phrase that comes in that's an interesting one, is mutual submission. So submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Reverence, means honoring. It's a foundational submission. It's not meant as a hierarchy, but it's about humility, service, putting other people ahead of our own needs. And one pastor said, right now our lives are sort of trying to beat each other up, trying to get one ahead of each other. Well, at least I'm not like that guy. But instead, I think it was Rick Warren who said, it's a race to the bottom. Who can be the better servant? Who can be more humble? And that's the idea. We are racing to be the most humble, to being the better servant, to putting other people ahead of ourselves. That idea of submission is about, like I said, humility. And then comes the big one here. And this is the conversation that always gets people riled up. And I'll talk a minute here about it. Is wives submit to your husbands as husbands submit to the Lord. And so people stop right there, right? This is authoritarian. This is about dominance. And, and I will be honest with you, in the past of humanity, this phrase has been used poorly by people, as saying not just husbands, wives, you submit to me, but then also, leaders saying you have to submit to me because I was a, God-given leader. I mean, this has been used poorly, but that doesn't mean we have to take it poorly, right? The idea is that there is an order. It's about mutual love. So first of all, wives submit to your husbands, but as husbands submit to the Lord, okay, and as Jesus submitted to God. The submission's all the way there. Submission means honoring the God-given roles that we've been given in this, that we are always in the Lord. And it's not even blind obedience too. I joked once, and I didn't mean it, but, saying like, oh, so that means if your husband, wants you to take cocaine, you should. I sort of was being smart at that point. And it's not it at all. It's about respect. It's about respecting each other, because there's another part that we'll talk about submitting to each other. But the idea is that, again, humility, love, respect. There is that. And it's the same thing as your husband respects God. If your husband is doing something that is not respecting the Lord, that's another issue, right? Now he's not doing his part of it too. It's not blind obedience. It's not, well, I just better not give my opinion because, that's the idea. So now we get, like I said, into this next part. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's not dominion. It's not cruelty. It's not ordering around. It's about sacrifice. What did Jesus give up for the church? Everything, including his own life. He gave everything for the church. That's the model. So real love is about sacrifice, cherishing the other person, and building up holiness in each other. So like I said, if a husband truly loves like Christ loved, it won't be exploited, abused, coercion. It's about giving and service and nourishing. And Paul says, because loving your wife is loving yourself. You are one flesh. If you look at each other as one being, then that means it is all about love. When you love your wife, you love yourself as well, because you're in this together. And this relationship, he calls it a profound mystery, reflects Christ and the church. In the end, let husbands love his wife as himself, and let the wife respect her husband. It's the end of it. I mean, that is how it goes. And so, like I said, we can listen to the Bible, and and you hear that all the time, right? There are people who I watch them on YouTube who will take a passage out of the Bible and try to blow it up into something either awful or something that they want it to say because they're against the Bible, instead of taking it in the best possible way and taking it in a realistic way. Submission is a part of my church. I'll tell you that honestly. But that also means more, for the husband, of how that husband is to act and treat his wife. So, like I said, we could take it poorly, or we could take it in the way it was intended to be taken. Look at it, search our hearts, and do a deep dive on that. And, take it for what it says instead of what we either want to turn it into, a battle we want to turn it into. We can be silly about it in both ways. It either means nothing, or it means I get to tell you everything, and maybe it means neither of those two things. This week I'm going to meditate on what kind of fragrant is, my life offering to God. Are we walking in love, in light? Are we showing respect and sacrifice and all of that? How are we actually, treating our lives? Is when God gets a whiff of it, is he going, there's Jill. She's doing, her reflection of me. Maybe it's not perfect, but, she's getting there. And what I'm going to pray about is that we get this idea of submission. There is so much in this world that wants to turn this into something horrible, something evil, something, either I'm not going to get married because it's terrible and it's about submission, or, I'm going to, I guess I can't say anything. Like I said, people go too far in either direction it is. We're supposed to submit to each other. We're supposed to submit to husbands and wives to each other. We're supposed to submit to the church and submit to God. A lot of submissions going on. And I guess I would pray that we look at it, that we understand it better, that we walk into understanding it with a heart of humility and service and putting others in front of us. And then I think we're going to get it. Again, if you are worried about it, talk to your pastor about it and get a little bit more information about it too. And what I'm going to share with others is this idea that we're supposed to walk into the light, that we're supposed to fill our time, our entertainment time, our quiet time, our book reading time, whatever time we have, with lightness. And as we fill it in, it shoves out the darkness. I think that, like, when we talk about meditation, we talk about the fact that we are filling ourselves up with God instead of emptying ourselves, like Eastern meditation. When you empty yourself, remember, the evil spirit found an empty house, went out and got 7 more worse than itself and brought them all into the house. But when we fill ourselves with God, we are filling ourselves with light. We are not allowing this darkness into our lives. The more we fill ourselves with good things, I think the easier it's going to be for us to start reflecting God and reflecting His light in this world. All right, everyone, thanks so much. Appreciate you being out there. I hope you're having a great time reading the Bible, in whatever form you're doing it in. But getting into the Bible and understanding it is going to just make every day of our lives better. You can email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. Love to hear from you. And thanks so much and have a great day.